How's it going, YouTube? Coming at you today with another video, and today, guys, what the bring to is going to be the meta tier list for the brand new format, and it's really exciting because we're going to have a lot of new decks hitting the fray, and the fact that we have about 10 or 15, it's going to be a lot like the previous formats before tier, where it was really hard, honestly, to decide for every single deck that was out there, but it's going to be a little different now, because we have Kashtira and Branded introduced into the game, so alongside not having too many shufflers in the game, we're still going to have other things that we got to be cautious of when we're playing a lot of different decks, especially if you want to play like maybe Mathmech. You got to be worried about a Bestial on your super factorial targets, and even playing like Drytron, we still have to worry about Bestials, and then if Sword Soul becomes really popular, then we have Fang. So just a lot of different things to think about in that regard. But I am joined by DB Grinder today. Thank you so much for joining me here. When it comes to new meta, are you excited for it? Are you a little cautious going into these new events? Like, what do you think is going to be the better deck? And then also, what do you think is going to be something that is going to be really overrated moving forward?
Something overrated, probably Kashtira. People just like honestly think that's like the best deck since like it was the second best before and then tier left. So like people just like instantly said that was the best deck. And I think like Branded's gonna be really strong. Drytron maybe. Really depends like what people end up playing because like if Bestials are super popular, then some of these decks get hurt really bad by them.
So with the Bestials, do you think that they're going to be really popular at this event, or do you think that people are going to be off of them now that tier is going to be less prevalent?
I think they're still gonna be pretty popular. Probably mainly in the side deck, but a deck like Branded main deck some of them too, and that deck's gonna be really popular.
And then we were just talking a little bit about Dragon Link as well. And then if you have Mind Hacker ripping like Striker Dragon, then that's a little unfortunate. But even if a lot of people are going to start playing Dragon Link, then you still have to worry about that deck too. Definitely going to be still prevalent in the meta, especially if we think that Brand is going to be one of, if not the best deck. I could see a lot of people using Bestials in the main deck to go ahead and counter that strategy as well. So looking at our first deck today, we have Drytron. Now, this is a really interesting one. It's seen a lot of success in its time, and we have a lot of Ben 10 right now, and that's something that we saw before being kind of scary. And we still have the one orange light, you know, we don't have three of them, so like a little different, but at the same time, we still have a lot of opportunity for this deck to do really well. Of course, if a Bestial doesn't go off, then the deck can put up a pretty menacing board. Definitely a lot that the deck can do, but for me, I do think that Sword Soul is going to be really popular, just because it's going to be one of the comfort decks that I feel like a lot of people are going to switch to for the new event, because especially whenever you see a huge ban list before an event where everyone is prepared to play a different deck, everyone kind of goes back to the deck that they're really familiar with, and I feel like that's going to be Sword Soul for a lot of people. And so having access to Fang still going to be really nice. And then again, just the amount of Bestials, I don't think they're really going anywhere, maybe a bit reduced, but I feel like Drytron, for me at least, is going to be a really hard time to play. I feel like there's going to be some success with it, but for me, I think it still has to stay at like a tier 2 range.
I'll probably put it a little bit above tier 2. I think the deck is honestly kind of being slept on. Like its turn 1 is broken. Like it's actually just FTK. Like, but this deals do absolutely hurt that deck. Like you said, Fang hurts the deck, but like the deck can play go in second cards. So maybe like those will try to like counter Fang, have a lot of cards in the side deck to beat that kind of card. Because I think like Sword Soul, like if they just set up like Synchro 8, Synchro 10, like they get cooked by a single Talons or a Tasking, really any going second card.
Yeah, and that's always been the weak point of Sword Soul as well. So definitely going to be a really interesting time figuring out exactly what deck can really perform under the conditions that we're about to see at the next event. And just having 6 essentially taskings in the game is pretty crazy, you know, between tasking and tactics. Both of those cards are absolutely wild. So yeah, I could definitely agree. Maybe we could put Drytron to like the 1.5 then, because it still has a bit holding it back, but a lot of potential.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good spot for it.
So looking at this next one here, definitely an interesting choice. I know that a lot of people have talked about it in the past. Having all of the Ishizu cards limited as well, I feel like hurts a little bit too, just because you were playing the Vernicelfs and you have like Fenrir's and like the entire Kashtira engine that people were looking at too with like Madolche. But Madolche for me, I feel like this is still always just a rogue category deck, no matter what. I don't really know if it's going to be one of the better ones, but it's definitely an outlier that we see like do really well here and there.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it's rogue. I mean, it doesn't really have anything going for it. Like before, when everyone was playing like 8 Bestials in their main deck, at least that deck completely dodged them. But it doesn't even have that going for it now.
Yeah, and I feel like there's always going to be the random Madolche deck that just like hits top cut or like near top cut and does well. So it's definitely interesting to see how the deck evolves here and there. But as far as right now, I don't really see it doing a whole lot. But a deck that I could see doing a whole lot, especially the fact that talking about dodging Bestials, The Rika Sunavalon deck, I don't really feel like much has changed outside of having the taskings now, which of course is just an amazing card for any strategy that you want to put down. But at the same point, I feel like this is another one where, for example, if your play gets stopped and let's say they clear your monster, you can go ahead and like tasking for unexpected die and then continue playing. So there's a lot of really cool things that you can do. And of course, tributing for cost is always a pretty wild thing to do whenever you're going first. This, I would say this is similar as far as like a first turn board to like Drytron. If you're able to set up like Con, Ricochet, and like the whole board, of course, it's going to be crazy. With Nibiru being really prevalent in the format, that's a little scary because of the fact that it's not really going to be able to play through that super well. So I'm kind of torn on this one. I think, at least for me, that it has a lot of potential, but this is still something that I would probably put in like a tier 2 range.
Yeah, I would also put it in a tier 2 range. I think it's like a little bit better than like Rogue. I think it's definitely better than Madolche, but like you said, like it gets hurt really bad by Nib. A lot of people are going to be main decking that card. The deck going second definitely kind of struggles into like a branded board, so that'll be kind of tough for it to beat too.
Do you feel like any deck that just has a really hard time going second is just inherently lower than all the others, like immensely? Or do you feel like some are warranted where they're just like a really hard going first deck and it's like if it goes first, you win. If it goes second, you just kind of lose? Because we'll talk about a deck a little later on that I feel like is really similar, but I feel like it's a little bit better even though it has a hard time going second. But having a deck like Sunavalon, I feel like that's always just been like the downfall of the deck, is going second just is not a good time.
Yeah, the deck really worked really well with like Mystic Mine and stuff, and especially because people didn't really know what it did before. Like a lot of people didn't know how to interact with it, but I think the deck's been around long enough where people know how to interact with it now and stuff. But its engine itself doesn't feel that well going second. It gets hurt really bad by Runick cards. Runick cards are probably going to be pretty popular at the YCS, or at least a little bit popular, and that deck auto loses to a Runick card.
Yeah, and then even looking at a lot of the ways that your deck gets banished face down now, Kashtira banishing like a fourth of your deck is kind of crazy. And so losing out on a lot of those really key one-ofs in the deck, like what happens when I think it's Sun Seed Twin, or if that gets like banished, then like your sowings are just kind of not great. So definitely a really rough time, but tier 2 for sure, because if it goes first, the end board's pretty crazy. But if you go second, it's a rough time. So how do you feel about Sword Soul moving forward?
Sword Soul's decent. Like, I don't know, I feel like it's always just been like a decent deck. I never felt like it was the best deck or anything. Um, it's not bad. I don't even know where I'd want to put it exactly, just because like it depends like how popular tasking and talents are gonna be, because those cards are kind of bad going second in the Kashtira, but like they're really good and pretty solid going second against almost everything else. Including Sword Soul. Like Sword Soul just get cooked by a single Talons. So I'd probably want to put it around like the tier 2 spot. Yeah, probably around the tier 2 spot.
So putting Drytron just a little higher than Sword Soul at the moment, just because of what the deck can do for going first and second versus Sword Soul, where the boards are kind of getting hurt by minimal interaction. It feels like right now, because all it really needs is like one tactics or like a lava golem, and then all of a sudden it's lights out.
Yeah, yeah.
Lava Golem being in the game right now in like spear mode is always going to be a scary time, because the second that you start putting up a board, it's like it doesn't matter what you do, like you can't really play around getting a Lava Golem. So looking at the next deck that we have here is going to be Kashtira. This is definitely going to be the powerhouse of the format, besides the other being Branded. But for me, at least, I feel like this would be at least an obvious tier 1. I know that there's a lot of overhype to the deck, but it's still one of those things where a lot of the cards do quite a lot, and if it goes first, your zones are locked, your deck gets banished to fourth, and then your extra deck gets ripped. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I just feel like there's like a lot of really good cards against the deck. Like before, when everyone had the main deck Bastiles and like they kind of like focused on tier, and now people can like afford to focus on other decks. So I feel like Kashtira gets hurt a lot by that. Like Book of Eclipse in the main. You can play Lunar Eclipse, Econ, Lava Golem, Nib, Sphere Mode. Like there's just so many cards that like cook that deck. Ibli's probably gonna be pretty popular since it's pretty decent against Kashtira and also Branded, but Kashtira players can just play Lingaribo to beat it. So I feel like Lingaribo like at 2 is gonna be like mandatory in the extra deck for cash.
So with that being said, would you move Cash any lower if you were going to put like Branded at tier 1?
I'd probably still just leave Cash there to be honest, just because like it's still a pretty strong deck. As long as you play it like correctly, the deck still plays through like a lot of things. Like the deck can play through Nib if you play it correctly. I just think most people will just kind of full force put him on better habit.
I've seen a lot of people testing out Cross Out in Cash and Branded. So definitely an interesting card coming back to the meta. Not one that I particularly ever played, but I definitely understand the need of my deck auto loses to this card, and we need a way to play around it.
Yeah, yeah. It's also cool how like Crossout can kind of like get you started because you can like banish Unicorn, Birth Summon it back if you already have Papayas. I know it's like a 3 card combo, but like at least it like can somewhat help you in some scenarios.
Yeah, I was talking about that with someone about like Branded. You can like cross out, banish like a tragedy or like a monster that you need to get like a Lubellian shuffle back going for a fusion. So definitely really interesting uses of it. But just kind of moving the next one up, then being Branded, just the other deck that I feel like is going to be the rival of Cash this format.
Yeah, that deck's really really strong. One big downside is Ibly, but you know there's like Book of Eclipse, Econ. You can just tribute a Bestial over the Ibly. So like the deck does have a decent amount of outs to it. You do just have to like respect that card though, otherwise you get cooked by it. Because even if you do play like double Lingeribo, you can't Branded Fusion afterwards, and that's also like a lot of extra X space for Branded.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because I have a playset of secret econs I've been waiting to use, and this is definitely going to be the format. I'm excited. Ibly is definitely a card. It's definitely a card. I just love the fact that Branded can go ahead and kind of do the same thing to Cash by going for Expulsion and giving them Ido. I do like the interaction of like Branded Fusion into Lindworm being able to like bounce the Arise Heart too. So definitely going to be an interesting one to see which one beats the other one out for the top spot. So talking about Mathmech under a macro Cosmos, this format is going to be really interesting. Whenever you're not playing against Kashtira, I feel like Mathmech is still going to be a pretty solid option. Of course, we still have to worry about Bistals in this deck. Super Factorial, really crazy card, but if you just hold your Bistal for your turn and then they activate Super Factorial and you banish Diameter, then it's kind of unfortunate because all you get is an Alan Burson search, and by that time you're probably getting OTK'd. So it's an interesting position to be in.
I actually don't think the deck gets hit with like a Rise Heart that often. I've had a buddy testing it a lot. You know, you just play a bunch of hand traps, and like you can honestly stop a Rise Heart a lot. Shifter still cooks that deck though. They can't do anything under Shifter. And then like you said, Bystials, if you just hold them, you know, you just hit the diameter. They don't really do a whole lot after that. It's just hand traps at that point.
Yeah, and the fact that we're going to see a ton of hand traps too this format is going to be really interesting. All these different decks, including Adagnister, which I don't have on here, but I think the decks are really insane too. We see it just definitely topping a YCS here and there. I believe at Hartford he even had a spot. And it's definitely interesting to see what that deck will do too. Just the availability to have so many different options in the deck and really being able to put up like that Adagnister Towers. That card is still pretty crazy alongside like the Cyberus Quantum and then the Cynet Conflict. And the end board's still not bad, and being able to go into a board with like the access code combo as well, just like Sala does, still not super bad. With Mathmech, would you put that more so like 1.5 or 2?
I would definitely put it in like tier two, just because like the cards it struggles with, it really really struggles with.
Yeah, definitely the free banishes, really unfortunate. The deck itself, though, definitely has a lot of utility, a lot of hand traps, so we could definitely see this potentially move up later on, but I think right now tier 2 is definitely a good fit for it. Floowandereeze is an interesting one because they have their barrier statue removed, and I've been seeing the screenshot go around for, like, you know, all of Twitter, and it was the one where it's like, you banish MP and Rovina and grab the water barrier. um Definitely interesting. But I think that playing against Kashtira with Floowandereeze, if you're starting, having that Book of Moon in the trap card is pretty crazy still. You still have a lot of different things the deck can do against other matchups. You still have Shifter, so it's just a lot more fair now without the statue.
Yeah. Um. It's an interesting deck just because like it still does a lot, but it doesn't like flood the opponent out anymore. So you kind of have to like you can actually like play and use your engine to try to break the end board, unlike you really could before. I'm not sure exactly where I'd put the deck though. Now that I think about it, like maybe like bottom of tier two. It's just not like the greatest spot right now either. A Rise Heart's also really good against that deck. You can like attach the birds to a Rise Heart to like get rid of them. But the deck can also play like Snarl, so that way they can like, book the field with Dreaming Town and book the field with Snarl. That's pretty nice.
Being able to have things like Advent still in your arsenal, you still have like the unexplored winds. Like there's still a lot of really cool cards and a lot of really cool things that the deck can do, but I just don't know exactly how strong it's going to be moving forward. I do think that eventually somebody's going to end up doing something with the deck still, though. We'll just have to wait and see. And plus, like, it's really interesting to think about too. Like, they play duality and prosperity, so like getting to another floodgate and just being able to just use the additional normal summon off of Empen is probably going to eventually happen. I just want to ask you your thoughts on Sky Striker this format. I've heard a lot of talk about it.
So I feel like pure Striker is probably just not the wave. It's probably just like Runick Striker. Like the Italian guy played like 3 weeks ago that ended up being top 8 at some tournament. The deck's probably gonna have to be played somewhat like that. Tasking is broken in that deck. It's by far the best card in the deck.
Search Engage.
Yeah, it's just so good.
I saw that and I was like, wow, we have 4 Engage. That's crazy.
I'd probably put the deck in like tier 2. The Runick cards help a lot, just because like the Runick and Striker cards are just really decent into like every single matchup, except for like Branded. I mean, if you can get Shark Cannon, it's not bad. The deck can also play Lava Golem now, since you don't have to actually play Ray, since you have like Linkage, Hornet, Engage. And it's more of like a Runick deck and more of like a Striker as like an engine inside the Runick deck, which I think is nice. I also think the deck is really, really skillful.
Yeah, that's always going to be like the biggest thing about Striker too, right? Is you play like 10 rounds of Striker and at the end of the day you're like, wow, my head hurts, you know? It's just like you have to play perfectly. If you play one card out of place, you just lose the game. So like it's definitely something that if you have played the deck before, that you'll be able to manage and adapt with it very well. If you've never played the deck before, maybe play some games of like toss with people and just kind of learn the deck and then start trying to innovate to where we're at now with like 1 Engage, because it's a lot different than what we had before. But I could definitely see tier 2 with this, because a lot of these decks are going to be more so unexplored at the moment. This is more so of like a first look at the format where we can see things going. A lot of my mindset right now goes back to, I believe, May of last year, when we still had Despia being like the quote-unquote best deck, and it was still like the Prank Kid deck was around and whatnot. So we definitely have to see where we're at now. And again, we have Bitch and whatnot, so it changes a lot. Bitch were some of the craziest cards ever printed. Like, just reading back to it, I was like, wow. So I definitely like the fact that we are kind of getting a new format, but at the same time, they really did go a little crazy on tier. So we'll have to see what tier can really cook up, and we'll talk about where we're going to place that in a little bit. But now we're going to move on to my favorite rogue deck in the game. And I don't know if I would even put it just like at rogue. I think that it's a little bit more than rogue, and that's Plunder Patrol. I love this deck. I think that it's really fun. I think it's really cool. But now on a real note, we have Yord. And so Yord's kind of crazy. It allows you to go first really well. You can put up lists, you get a free draw, and then also you're just able to get the double summon essentially, because the first turn you get the list, the second turn you can put up whatever you need to. And then like to search off lists if your opponent tries to interact with you. So there's a lot of really good things that you can do with Plunder. And then also if you're trying to go second, you can play like Kaiju Slumber to go ahead and destroy a lot of the boards that we're seeing. You have Kaijus for things like the Shangri-La if it doesn't go to the grave off like the Slumber. You have things like Evenly Matched, and of course being able to put the Kaiju on your opponent's board to get the free attribute, or just like using Yord is also very strong. So I think that Plunder's in a really good spot now with Yord. We are missing a ship right now, but hopefully that comes soon. For me, I would still put this in tier 2. I think that it's pretty strong. But where would you put it?
I'd probably also put it in tier 2. It's also cool how like the deck like gives the opponent a token, which is just like really nice versus Kashtira.
Oh yeah. It's so cool just being like, here you go. It's like, wow, this is kind of awkward. So yeah, this will be in tier 2. We kind of talked about this next one, but with Dragon Link right now, especially with the Kashtira matchup, how do you feel about it?
It's like Kashtira clicks this deck, banish Striker Dragon, no access to boot. So maybe, and the thing is, like, the Bystials are also losing a decent amount of their value, it seems, with like a really open format. So with the Bystials not being as good, Striker Dragon gonna get banished. The deck's kind of not in the greatest spot.
I agree. It's definitely interesting because the second that it's gone, and if you're playing cards like Black Metal Dragon 2, then you kind of have to hope that you have like some other extender to get into like the next step of your combo, but without a Striker not being able to get boot sector is also really awkward because that's a really key piece of combo now since we're missing so many other pieces because the pan list always cooks Dragon. But we did just get a couple more Destrudo, I guess, if that matters. And definitely waiting on like Ancient Fairy Dragon to see if we can do anything cool with that. But as of right now, definitely in a really rough spot. So where would you like to put this?
I was gonna sound wild, but I'd probably put it in Rogue. I feel like it just isn't a good choice at all right now.
Yeah, it's definitely in a weird spot. The like you were saying though with the Bishals and getting Striker ripped, it's just like it's good against a lot of other matchups, and if you play against things like, I don't know, Sword Soul or even like Labrynth or whatever else you play against, you'll probably have a really solid time because the deck still does what it did, and so now you have a lot of cool things that you can do in the deck still. But at the same point, if you're really looking to win, let's say of like a regional rounds 5 to 9, and you're planning on playing against Kashtira like 2 or 3 times, you're gonna lose one of those die rolls, and it's gonna be a rough go. And so, unless you're planning on committing Gamma, Nibiru, and like Imperm to your main deck just to stop Mind Hacker, it's gonna be tough. And if we know anything about Dragon, especially right now, you want a lot of your key components in your deck, and so there's not a lot of room to be able to just put in so many cards just to break a board. The next one, though, I think is really interesting, and I think a lot of people wrote this deck off pretty quick, and then a lot of people went right back to it because it's Spright. And just any level 2 on the board is pretty crazy. I know that there has been a lot of replays on your channel about the Cyrus Gadget list, and I think that's really cool. The token being a level 2 is really neat. Just a lot of different things that you can do with that. The Lingaribo in that deck is actually really cool because if you're playing against anything that even has like some kind of trap, then you don't really have to worry about that, or like a random imperm that your Gigantic is safe from now. So I do think that there's a lot of potential with Spright, and for me, I would still throw this up to like 1.5 because of just all the endless possibilities with this, or even just as an engine alone. But what do you put Spright at?
Yeah, I'd probably also put it at 1.5 just because, like, there's like Pure Sprite. I don't think Tri-Brigade Sprite's pretty good, but that's another deck. Runick Sprite is probably like the best build of Sprite.
Yeah.
It can't play as many hand traps, but the Runick cards are pretty nice. The deck can go first, and it still sets up a really good end board. And the Runick cards are just like infinite engine, anyways. So get follow up with the Sprite stuff while setting up interruptions, because you can go for double cross, and that's either you can either use it to like take, or you can just use it to like summon back out Jet to search starter for follow up if you need to. So it gives you options.
Yeah, and then we have the new Bujin card in the extra deck that people have been using too to go ahead and make that totally awesome. So if you do add double cross, and you essentially still get the double toad, which is kind of cool. And it's still a lot that the deck can do. I know that Spright Elf being banned was a little awkward, but I was not personally thinking they would have banned Elf. I was thinking maybe Sprint, but they went after Elf, and I mean, like, rightfully so. The non-targeting was kind of insane, alongside just like free follow-up and like the free reborn. But like, I definitely thought they were gonna go after like Sprint and not Elf. That was kind of nuts.
I thought they were gonna maybe like limit blue or jet, maybe not ban anything, but it's fair enough. Elf probably should have never came out. That card is, so I'm kind of happy it's gone though.
Anytime we see a generic Link 2 that's just crazy, we can just assume that it has its, time on the clock. Like, it's going to be banned at some capacity. So, definitely interesting. But I agree. I didn't really, in my ban list prediction, I said that they probably wouldn't even touch Spright at all. So, when I saw the Spright Elf ban, I was like, that's insane. But definitely interesting. We have another deck here with the theme of Runick going around being the Naturia deck. I've been seeing a lot of like the Shizu Naturia. We have like with the Vernis Elf cards, and then you also have like the Runick Naturia. I think that the deck's pretty cool. I think that it can do quite a bit. As far as an option right now, if I were to play it, I'd probably play like the Runick Naturia, just because I feel like, again, the Runick cards are pretty nice this format, just being able to counter so many different options of decks, and especially when everyone's going back to like their comfort deck, and then you're going to see a variety. I think just having enough coverage into any situation through like the Runick cards is really nice as well. But as far as like the Naturia deck itself, I'm kind of torn on where to put this right now, just because like the deck does have, I would say, a higher ceiling, and it's still pretty good. But at the same point, I don't know if it's like on the same par as some of the other decks on here.
I'd probably put it like tier two. I think one of the things that the deck has like really going for it is that like not a lot of people even know how to interact with the deck properly. I feel like everybody just plays against that deck wrong, even though like we've seen it around a lot. Um, the deck also, like you said, like the Runick cards are really really good. It plays all the Runicks. People don't really know how to interact with the Naturia. The Shufflers are gone, so like all the Runick cards are just infinitely better now than they were like a week ago.
Yeah, I was kind of split too because I think that as far as like a tier two deck, it's definitely solid. But if I had the choice to play like Runick Naturia, I could say that it might be a little bit better than a couple of the decks on here because I still think that it can play going second pretty well too. So I would say if it wasn't like 1.5, it would be like the high end of tier 2.
Yeah, I think like high end of tier two is definitely a good spot for it.
So we'll probably just end up talking about this more as like an engine since it's already with a lot of different decks here. But we also have seen pure Runick with like Majesty's Fiend as well. Where would you put just the Runick engine, and then where would you put like pure Runick with like Majesty's Fiend?
Um, Honestly, both probably just like high tier two, just because like they're good against everything. Runic Stun, it's also pretty good. I think people are gonna be a little bit more prepared for back row now than they were before, just because you kind of got more. It's like it's not like you have more space in your side deck, but you need to cover way more decks.
Yeah.
So something like Lightning Storm is pretty good, but then like Runic, they kind of dodge Lightning Storm. So then like I don't know. I don't know. Runic Stun's interesting. I can't believe like a deck with Messenger apiece in it is like tier two right now.
Yeah, it's actually decent. I saw that the other day, like back when it was like still relevant and like at before like tier, and I was like, wow, is this really what we're doing now? You know, like, but it's kind of crazy because it reminds you a lot of Striker in a way because of the fact that like the cards just have MST, they have burner, they have all the cards that you'd want out of like utility for a deck, right? So
Mhm.
I think that's really cool. And then you look at a card like Slumber, and even if you look at like the purely cards, they have Slumber split between two cards. And it just shows you like how crazy some of these are just on their effects alone. And not only just that, like you're also banishing cards out of your opponent's deck. So like if you're playing Runick and you play against somebody trying to make Tearlaments work, at that point, if you banish like one of their names, it's a rough go. So
Yeah.
it's definitely interesting, and I feel like that's why a lot of people are now playing Grief because they want to make sure they add back some of the traps, and it just makes the deck go really kind of crazy. And we'll talk about that when we get to it. But I think that Runick just has a lot of potential this format. It's really nice, and that's something too where I was kind of thinking too, where like if you were able to play maybe like Runick with Cash, because you could set up like the full board with Fountain, and then if they like Book of Eclipse you, they Lava Golem you, they Spear Mode you, you could still like Runick your opponent, and you don't like auto lose.
Mhm.
So just like an interesting theory there, but definitely a really cool engine that we'll see utilized the entire format.
I also think one downside about like the Runic banishing is like the top two decks, like Kashtira, like banish Papayas, free add back, or like Branded, you hit like Mercari or Tragedy, free surge. So like there is like some downsides to the engine for sure, where like your opponent can just get free pluses off of it. But against like every other deck on here, except for I guess like Floowandereeze, like the banishing is huge. Like there's so many like couple cards that you can just hit, and it would just like hurt their deck a lot.
Yeah, it's really crazy too, because even if you're playing against like Naturia, if you banish like a couple Mole Cricket, it's like, what do you do? But we do see another deck here that just got into the meta again. And potentially it's still, I would say, not as crazy as some of the other decks on here, but Labrynth. I do think that, for me at least, that Labrynth would still fall under maybe like a low tier 2 rogue. Just because of the fact that there's one thing that just completely makes me not want to play any kind of trap deck right now, and that's because of the fact that you can go tasking into Duster. And that just seems terrifying to play anything with a set 4. So definitely want to hear what your thoughts are on this deck.
Yeah, so like you said, like tasking into like harpies, that's pretty scary. Also if you play this deck at like a YCS and people like, oh, this Labyrinth guy's doing good and they're playing cash, they can also just block your spell and trap zones and you'll pass with no spell and trap zones. So that's tough. Like you kind of like have to have hand traps then, but Labrynth doesn't really play hand traps right now. So it kind of makes you think like, will the deck list like kind of switch up? Uh, I'm not sure. To be honest, I'm not sure. I haven't tested Labrynth, but some of the new traps are broken. Like they keep
Yeah.
releasing some really dumb trap cards, like insane.
So maybe we do like a low tier 2 on this.
Yeah, like low tier two, maybe even Rogue. I'm not a
Yeah.
big fan of trap decks,
Me
to be honest.
neither. It's just like it's almost like playing third, right? Especially like if you go second, it's really tough because there's so many different like really crazy decks that are doing a lot. So if you're just relying on like set 4 pass and then your opponent goes end phase Branded and Red Chimera, it's a rough time. So I don't really know if this is going to be like the correct call. I think that it's a cool option for the format. But as far as being more so in the competitive scene, I don't really know if we'll see it just yet. So when it comes to the next one here, I've been hearing a lot of people talk about the P.U.N.K engine and really being able to use this again. Now, where do you think that the P.U.N.K engine will end up lying in this format?
I don't know. There's like a lot of different ways you could do it. Like there's like Punk Therion. That deck got a boost with the new Synchro and Photon Hypernova. I don't know its name, but it dumps a plant, so like you can make Punk and Therion work together. There's obviously like the insect stuff that also works with the Punk stuff. But the Punk engine itself feels kind of bad. Like it feels like if you get your board broke, that you kind of just lose. At least that's like my thought process with it. Like sometimes you can get like the second deer node off, and you can actually like try to make some synchros. But I don't know. I think it'll probably be more of an engine and less of like an actual deck.
Yeah, and the synchro you're looking for is the Diabolantis, and
Mhm.
that card's pretty crazy. I've been seeing a lot of talk about that too. And Punk Therion, and I feel like the whole thing about like your board getting broken in Punk, that's kind of how it always was. Whereas like you put up like this huge board, and maybe you have the option to go in like Punisher, but other than that, like if it got broke, you were just really far behind. And so for me at least, I don't really know if the P.U.N.K engine is going to be able to do enough because especially if you're playing against Kashtira and they have a Rise Heart and Foxytune has to send for cost to grave, like that's kind of tough. And just
Yeah.
not having a graveyard. So many people are on Ash Blossom right now because Branded Fusion, it's just like Branded's one of the best decks. So in a hand trap heavy format, I don't really know if Punk can really perform. So I would say, at least for me now, it'd have to be in the row category. But where would you put it?
Probably still put it in tier two, just because I feel like the Punk engine itself could be used in something else and end up being pretty strong. Um, I even saw like Plunder Patrol players playing it just because like you can make a Synchro 8, so you can make like the Jord guy or Yord guy with it. I don't know. It has a lot of potential. I think right now it's not the greatest, but definitely has a lot of potential.
That is fair.
So maybe put it like the top of Rogue.
Top of rogue into tier two, or
Yeah, like probably just top of Rogue for now. Just has a lot of potential.
yeah, and it's just like it's so broad right now talking about like what you really can use it in just because there's so many different decks out there and it's an engine, so there's a lot of different ways. But I would say that if I were to pick between two engines to play in a deck right now, being Runick or like Punk, probably picking Runick at the moment. So I just think that out of engines that I would put it probably lower than Runick at the moment. The next one is Exo Sister. I'm just gonna say not good on this one,
Yeah,
especially
I was
right
about to say not
now.
good. Holy, that deck is bad.
Like the best thing about Exo Sister was being able to play against Tier, and like when Tier is just not the deck that you're playing against, just seems a lot worse now. So definitely had his time in the spotlight, but I think now it's just not good. Would you pair it with Salad?
Yeah.
Oh
Like the deck
god.
has hand traps, which is cool. That's all it has.
Salad needs some
Literally.
help. Like, why is Gazelle still at one? They
Yeah, that's crazy.
need
That card's still a one.
they need support. They need all their gazelles back. Like, give them blaster. Like, let them have something. But it's just really surprising. I think if you had blaster, you could do like cool like Kashtira salad things because like at that point you can go like use blaster, like make a rank 7. But like we just don't have that access right now. But I don't know. You probably do something with it, but right now still it's just bad. It's so crazy. Salad has so many extenders and like so many different things that you can do with it, but like it always just turns into access code OTK or Nibiru, like one of the
Yep.
two. Um, Now, the next one is Marincess. I actually like this deck a lot. I think that it can do a lot. It has a lot of utility spots as far as what you can do and like what you can play. What's your experience with Marincess so far, and where do you think you'd place this?
So I haven't really tested it new format. But the main thing that hurt it before was like the shufflers that would just like destroy the deck. Um, and also like Tier was able to like easily push through the end board because it didn't set up enough interruptions. But now it's probably in a better spot for sure. Getting the extra ripped would hurt a lot. They have the SeaWorld Zelius or whatever its name is. That card's broken when you get waterlogged. It just
Yeah,
banishes the entire opponent's field. Um, so I don't know, maybe like bottom of tier two. Has a bunch of hand traps. Its engine is definitely stronger than a deck like Salad for sure. It's a deck that people don't necessarily know how to interact with it very well. They don't remember all the effects of the cards. Where like Salad, everybody knows Salad because like such a simple deck. But like even like Triangle, like the Coral Triangle's graveyard
that
effect.
card's
Like
broken.
yeah, nobody remembers like the just summon back out two from the graveyard, like Soul Charge for follow up.
Yeah, and I think that Marincess just has a lot of potential, and I wonder if there's going to be anything with the new like Gishki support and then like Marincess together. So maybe we see something like that too. I think that'd be really cool. I know that a lot of people are using like a lot of the new Gishki support to get to a way to get to even like Toad. I'd be really interested to see if people are going to try out maybe like the combination of the two, but I think just as a deck alone, that Marincess has a lot of potential in this format. It's just generally a pretty good deck. It's not like the craziest deck, but as far as just having the consistency over every game and just like a very simple combo with a lot of utility, I think that it really does well in a format like this. So I'm gonna let you start off on this one. We're at Tearlaments. Definitely interesting. Last week it was just insane, and now it's kind of like, it's fair.
Yeah,
uh,
that got hit so much. I would probably want to put it like kind of like low tier two, but that's also just for the time being. I don't think there's enough time to like really try to like break the deck before Vegas, unless if someone just really puts in the time and like finds some crazy cards. But like I was playing the deck and it just like felt way more clunky. Like there were times where just like I like you would try to fuse and it's like what am I even supposed to do here? Like I'm not even setting up like a good end board. And I'm spending so many cards to get to this point. I see a lot of people playing the Shaddolls to get to Winda, and then you mill Beast, you get a free draw. Where would you think you'd put it?
I think I would have to agree with you right now because like the deck wasn't RNG and now it's RNG. Like you can't normal summon Rhino anymore. It does nothing. Like you can't open up your turn going normal summon Rhino send Merly. Like it literally does nothing. And then
Yeah,
like if you use Havnus, it's horrible because like if you have the one name that you confuse with and you want that to be one of the names that you're milling, then like it's kind of unfortunate because you only have two to hit then. So like you're trying to mill out your entire deck looking for two cards. So it's just a lot different. But at the same time, I think that having just one of each name, meaning that you have three fusions that you're allowed to do, is still really crazy. It just means you have to use a different engine and then fuse late versus fusing early. And I think that's pretty cool that the deck still has a lot of potential. You have to play a lot of the spells and traps to be able to keep all the engine kind of rolling back into advantage and having it all come back to your hand. There's a lot that the deck probably can do. I would have to agree with you though, as far as in terms of getting ready for Vegas, this would have to find a really cool way to be able to play through the format because of the fact that Tearlaments has a lot of ways it can still play, but it just becomes really hard. And you could do maybe like a tier cash build too, but at the same time, like I'd probably just rather play cash at that point. But
yeah.
we'll have to see exactly what it can do because I was testing like branded tier, and the tier cards were super clunky. So I don't know if we can find anything that's not going to be like maybe like a pure tier or even like a small engine with tier. So we'll definitely have to see what happens. But I could agree like low tier two for now. And that's of course just for the time being, and like I'm sure that someone will find a really crazy way to use the deck, but as of right now and what I've seen in testing, definitely other options are seeming to be a bit better. So with the next one here, I know that you kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but like Tri-Brigade, and I assume that if you were to play Tri-Brigade, it's probably more so like a Spright Tri-Brigade more than like a Leery Tri-Brigade. You probably play both, but where would you place Tri-Brigade?
Um, Probably like tier two actually, and I think I would play it with the birds over the sprite cards. I think the sprite cards make it to where like you can get interrupted earlier on way easier, and the bird cards also make Zeus. And Zeus is like insane versus Kashtira, and then you can still play like a good amount of hand traps too in those kind of decks. Like both those builds, you can easily fit in like 14 going second cards. So you can like hand trap and then just try to like throw down a Zeus and then play main phase two. And Tri-Brigade still sets up a really good board. Maybe you just have to play like Revolt in the deck now with like the bird cards.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool too. The Leary cards are just really insane just for what they are. And just really being able to see like how far that can go too, because we also seen that topping doing pretty well back in I believe Hartford as well, and then looking a little far past that. But that doesn't mean that the deck can't perform well now too, because like Tri-Brigade's always like the dark horse of the format, you know? Like it's just always one of those decks where if somebody really knows what they're doing with the deck, they probably can perform with it. So it's definitely gonna be an interesting time to see who does what with Tri-Brigade. So the next one, as we were talking about Kashtira and the lovely zone locking, we did just get Servant of Endymion into 3. But you know, the number one problem with Pendulum always has been, hey, if I go second, I probably lose to a big board. But also, if you're playing against Kashtira and you get your Pendulum zone locked, what do you do? Where would you place this deck?
Probably just Rogue. I also don't think like the Endymion will be like the way to play the deck, even though it just went to three. It's probably still just like the Draco Pow cards,
Yeah.
or the Draco Slayers. Those cards are pretty nice. They set up a really good turn one board. They can play like some going second cards, so maybe they'll just like switch their going second cards to like Eclipse, maybe like Lava Golem, even though Lava Golem isn't like the greatest in the deck, 'cause you kind of want your normal. Maybe just like have their cards ready for like Kashtira, so that way they don't like auto lose with a zone locked.
Yeah, maybe it's just like Nibiru.
Yeah. That's probably pretty good in the deck too. It gives you a body for Beyond.
Yeah, I could see that too. I just think Nibiru is one of those cards where I've been seeing some people talk about like removing it from the deck, and I'm like, listen, in a format where there's like 18 decks, I'm probably playing Nibiru because it just has the most coverage into the most matchups. The next one, I'm going to hand this one over to you, is Mikanko, and how would you place this deck into the list? Because I've been seeing a ton of different variations with this deck and a lot of different things that you can do. Even as just like an engine or playing this as like another part of the deck, I think that there's a lot of possibilities.
I'll put it in the tier two. I think one thing the deck also is really going for it is people don't know how to actually interact with the Mikanko cards and like their battle phase and like dealing damage to the opponent. Like you can like attack, deal damage, and then snatch steal one of their guys and like poke, do a lot more damage. The combo turn one is still just OTK, like or FTK. It's just auto win. Like Christie is broken when it can't be destroyed by card effects. Like the how do you out that? Like Book of Eclipse, they have a negate for it. So, and then they also have Savage and the interventions, so you have to have a lot to break the end board. The deck does have a problem though with like the amount of going second cards it plays, so maybe that'll make it struggle a little bit more. But yeah, as you said, like it can also just be used as an engine. Like we saw people play it in tier, and it can help you get to like Beatrice, or you just activate like the main monsters effect. You search, and then you discard like a Solic or like a Tribute Karma or something, and you can go ahead and try to get that going, like your two stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely really solid. I know that there has been a lot of different testing with this deck alone. I think it's really cool just to see what the possibilities are. Again, just being another ritual deck, we have a lot of different cards that are also in support of that we haven't really been able to use a ton of, just because of the fact that, you know, rituals are not always the best option when it comes to deck building outside of like Drytron. But now that we have another one being Mikanko, is definitely really cool to see where that will go. So talking about engines, the last one that we have here being Scareclaw. When I was seeing like the Scareclaw tier, I just felt like it got outgassed by like just regular tier. So I do think that it's in like a weird spot, but I think moving forward, if we look like post Syac, it gets a little bit better. But as of right now, I don't really feel like it's as strong.
I feel like it's a rogue deck. I'm not gonna lie, it doesn't do enough turn one. Like if it goes first, it summons like the big guy, the 3000 attack guy,
Try
and like
hard.
it, yeah, like it gets a trap, but like, what is that really doing? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not horrible. But if they just out the link, you kind of just auto lose. I guess it could be kind of cool until like branded, but even then, they can actually just chain like branded in red and like tag out the Mirror Jade or Chimera and just out the link. I guess Chimera wouldn't because they have a rival engraved, but Mirror Jade, you just boop, out it because it's
Yeah.
only unaffected by stuff in defense, so you just get it off the field.
It's a good point.
Yeah, and that was just like off the top of my head. There's probably so many more interactions that cook that deck.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. I hear a lot of people talking about it. So maybe in the future we get more support, more cool things. Any final thoughts here?
No, not really. I feel like we built the tier list pretty good. Talked about a lot of things for sure.
Yeah, when it comes to looking forward to Vegas, and I know that a lot of people are testing for like Lyon this weekend, and then we have a couple more. I know everyone's looking forward to like their case tourneys and whatnot coming up for post Photon Hypernova. I know I am. It's definitely going to be really interesting. A lot of fun events, and especially with the new ban list being so massive, just so many different theories and testing. So if you do have any questions, or if you're wondering if you don't see your deck on here and you want to know where we'd place it, definitely go ahead and comment down below so we can kind of just see where you're thinking and like what you want to do with the deck, and then maybe we can give some input. But I do appreciate each and every one of you for being here and watching this all the way through. I love doing these longer discussion videos and having on guests. It's a lot of fun. Just being able to have a first look at the format as well, because I know everyone's kind of panicking right now, especially if you're playing tier, because massive ban list. It feels like we just got into beard, right? Like that was kind of crazy. Everyone's just like, what did we do? But it's, you know, it's fine. We'll find a way. I always say that in Yu-Gi-Oh, all we have to do is assess the situation, analyze what's going on, and then just adapt. And I feel like that's what makes Yu-Gi-Oh so special. It makes it so cool, is the fact that there's always over 10,000 cards to choose from and so many different combinations. So definitely gonna be a fun format coming up, and I'm very excited to see which deck prevails. All right, well, with that being said, I hope that everyone has a wonderful night, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you all so much.